all downhill, so if you wish to stay, it's literally a 10-minute walk straight down one street and over. So you can think about that as you go along. Yes. Just a few safety things, just to let you know, just hold the railing when we're at Hallsview Park. I'll remind you of another few things. We, on Lucy the Lobster, we don't have air conditioning, so if you get a little warm, you do the Bay of Fundy, slide the window open and you can cool yourself down, and when you get cold, close it. We're pretty simple on the trolley here, keeping it simple with air conditioning. So we're glad you're here. So welcome to the very first incorporated city in Canada. It started in May of 1783. The loyalists started to arrive from Philadelphia, Boston, and New York because they were fleeing the American Revolution and wanted to remain loyal to the king. And so they made this their home. And by 1785, it was a city, the beginning of a city, and it was an incorporated city at the time. So of course, like you said, there's a lot of firsts here. As we come along, you're going to look out in the water, and you're going to see an island, and it's Partridge Island. And Partridge Island was a quarantine station because we had 15,000 immigrants from Ireland arrive during the potato famine, and this was a quarantine station. So they stayed there for a few weeks till they were well or cleared to come. Many lost their lives and were unable to come and make St. John their home. So on the corner, we have a Celtic cross. Oh yes, that's a fun place over there. Enjoy watching them. The Celtic cross is in memory of those who died, as well as like the doctors and nurses that also passed away caring for the immigrants. We also have the Three Sisters lamp here on the driver's side, and it was used for navigating ships into the harbor. They had to see all three red sides of the lamp to ensure that they were safe to come in. The back is lit with white, so with white glass, so they had to make sure they could see all three. And she was called the Three Sisters. It was believed that many young ladies would sit underneath the lamp waiting for their loved ones. Of course, being a loyalist city and British roots, this is a very city that's laid out like an iron grid with straight lines, and a lot of things are named after British connections. So we're on Prince William Street. You're going to notice that with the influence, of course, of the loyalists, the houses look very similar to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Portsmouth, those cities. On the door side, we're coming by St. John High School. And St. John High School was the very first publicly funded school in Canada. When it was first, this is the second location. We had a large fire. So this was the second location, and it was just for the boys. The girls, when they were allowed to come, they had to sit in the back of the class. They had to sit in the back of the class, wear black, and come in a different door. And look at all the kids coming to visit. You're visiting the high school today. You must be doing something fun. And it was an international baccalaureate school, so you can graduate with some college credits if you enroll in that program. Across the street, there's a brick building with a sandstone arch around the door that has the word hotel. And this was our very first hotel in the city at the time. And it was the first hotel to have the running water in both the two separate taps and phones in the room. Very fancy. First one. It's great when you come uptown, all you do is you love seeing ships right across the end of the, coming down the hill from the upper streets. It's really neat. This building right here with the brown sign was the original Seamen's Mission. Sir Leonard Tilley, one of our fathers of Confederation, his wife Lady Tilley, started a Seamen's Mission for the men to come off the ship and provide a hot meal and a bed for them. And they would return to the ship, and it still runs as of this day on the other side of the harbor. This area right here is some very interesting buildings. So the one coming up on the right side is the Woodchucks building. We have a beer and throw axes in there, but it started out as a bank. So it was a bank of New Brunswick. The next building on this side, I'll show you this one, on the corner, was our original post office, and above the door has a carving of the Greek god of Mercury, which is the god of speed. So it's kind of funny for the post office. God of speed above the door. And the building on the corner on the driver's side is, if you look up, you're going to see 16 carved heads around the top of the second story windows. And the middle one is Mr. Chubb, and he has a bowler hat on. He's in the middle. And what's funny about it is when Mr. Chubb rebuilt the building after the fire, people really didn't care much for Chubb. He was a successful businessman, and he was friends with the mayor and the councilors, so he hired Mr. McCavity to carve faces, and he said, look, make us all look very important. Well, Mr. McCavity, the stone carver, didn't like him, so he made them all look ridiculous. So during the city hall meetings, they'd look out on the second floor and they'd get angry every time they would meet, and Mr. Chubb said it was a buffoonery that he had done that to them. This street is a great street. We have some great restaurants, coffee shops, some shops to enjoy. One street up from the parallel to the ships. Straight across in front of us is the current City Hall. And the City Hall has a red, orange, and yellow art installment on it. And it indicates the 3 small communities that came together of the Loyalists to make St. John City. We're now headed uptown. We're like Billy Joel, the song Uptown Girl, because we all go uptown. Because when we say we meet our friends, you're going uptown, it's all uphill. So this is our main street, King Street. It's the shortest, steepest, widest main street in Canada. And what's important about it is that we had a fire in 1877 that burned this whole side of the city down. But the street is so wide that the fire was unable to hop over the street, so that whole side of the city was saved. This is how we park in St. John. We drive around till you find a spot here, and then we wiggle, and slide in. A lot of the buildings on this street, if you look up, there's going to be some pluses painted on, like or crosses painted below the second-story windows to indicate muster stations and bedrooms. So after the fire of 1877, when they rebuilt the city, fire codes for North America were fundamental and began here to ensure that we never lost our whole city to a fire again. So it's interesting that, of course, 2 exits and like I say, mostly brick and stone. As we come up to the top of the hill, this is King Square. It literally cuts our main street in half. And King Square is a beautiful park, and it has a bandstand in the middle, lots of statues and monuments in honor of those who made a contribution to the city or province. And all the pathways are laid out like the Loyalist, the Union Jack. So they're all crisscross, the white portions of the flag. So when you look above, you see the flag. So it's really interesting. This is the Admiral Beatty Hotel, and it was a very high-end hotel, and it actually hosted John F. Kennedy and the kings and queens and other dignitaries. It's now a seniors complex. The next building is the Imperial Theater, and it's live theater, and it's about 125 years old. And we just finished the musical Come From Away. It was there for about 2 weeks. The story of Gander, Newfoundland in 9/11. And it was sold out every night. And the next building is right here, is the Irving Oil Headquarters. And Mr. Irving was one of the most successful Canadian businessmen of his time. And they have a very large empire of businesses that actually employ 1/3 of New Brunswick's population. So there's a lot of different businesses, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. This building on the corner is the old courthouse, and we have a new one, and this is going to be turned into a theater. But the front is beautiful sandstone, very formal, but in the back, completely different story. The back is where the prison was. So they said it didn't matter what the back looked like. So they used cast off stone that was on the port used for balancing ships, which was called ballast. And if you look back, when we pull along, take a peek back, and it's just a collection of stone from the port. I like it. There was a gentleman hired to build a set of staircases in the center, and he designed a stone circular freestanding staircase. So when he put the bill in for $350, they said, we're not paying that, it's not safe, it's not secure, so we're not paying for it. He goes, well, can I borrow the prisoners? And they said, sure. So he borrowed all the prisoners from the prison. They all stood on the stairs and they all wiggled and moved. And they proved that it was solid, so they paid the bill and returned the prisoners. There you go. Parallel across from us is the Loyalist burial grounds. It was intended on being on the outskirts of the city. The city grew around it, and the oldest stone is 1784, Mr. Conrad Hendricks. So he was only here in his new home of Canada for 1 year. We're now on the other side of King Square, so this is the other half of our main street. It's called King Street East. And there's a house coming up on the door side. And it is this one here, this brick one with the blue trim, and it has a D and a T above the door. And Dearborn and Taylor were business partners, and they wanted to raise their families together, so they built the house to share the house. And it was actually featured in an American architectural magazine because it was so lovely inside. So if you notice, this side of the street is more brick. So after the fire, it was rebuilt in a lot of brick buildings. And the other side is mostly wooden structures. So you can tell that this side of the street is older than this side because of the fire. The next house, which has a funny story, is 218 King. It's the second brick one. And it has a, look at the carved head above the door. So William Peters was building this house, and he loved this young lady, so he carved her head above the door. Then he proposed, and you know what happened? She said no. She said no. So he goes, okay. So his mom moved in with them. Then he proposed to another young lady he was courting, and she said yes. But she said, who's above the door? And he goes, just my mom. So, like I say, do not get into tattoos and stone carvings. Turned out all right for Mr. Peters. But straight ahead of us is Courtney Bay, the other side of the harbor. And you can see we have an oil refinery in the middle of our city. There is Mr. Irving built an oil refinery, and it was intended on being in the outskirts of the city, but the city grew around that as well. The house that's on the corner here was Mr. C. N. Wilson, who built this home, and he was a very successful businessman, and he was involved in the railroad. So this was his home. And the railroad tracks went right behind his home, and we still use a railroad for moving pulp and paper and oil and things, but yeah. So Mr. Irving was born in 1899 in the upper part of the province. He moved to St. John as a young man, and he started with a gas station called Primrose Gas. In the 1940s, 50s, he built the refinery that has expanded over and over, and it produces 200,000 barrels of oil a day. And it's interesting because there we go. Yes. So of course, Mr. Irving was worried about all his employees being late for work because they had to drive around to get out east. And so he said to the city, may I build a causeway across Marsh Creek? And they said yes. So we're coming up to the causeway to get everybody to work on time. And on the left side of the causeway, he said, well, I'll let everybody use the causeway, not just my workers, if you allow me to buy the land on the other side. And he put a lubricant plant over on that side. So like I say, very successful and actually very generous to the province and the city. And like I say, the Irving family, his 3 sons became involved and took over the empire when he passed away. And now we have grandchildren like moving into the spots as we lost the three brothers just a few years ago. So we are now in a place that's called Marsh Creek. So all along here, in the time of the golden, wooden ship era, we had shipyards all along here, and New Brunswick's covered in forestry, so it led perfectly to have shipyards. One of the ships was named the Marco Polo, which your cruise terminal is named after. So James Smith built the Marco Polo, named after the Venetian explorer, Marco Polo, and he decided to make her a little different. She was a cross between a clipper ship and a cargo ship, so she was a little wider at the top so she could carry lumber. So the day of the launching of April 1853, everybody, they closed school and businesses, they got dressed up and came down to see the launching. they dedicated the ship, and they knocked the blocks away, and she rolled a little bit and got stuck in the mud. So everybody's like, boo, and oh dear, and they all left disappointed. So they took 2 weeks to dig her out, and by the time they got out, she had a twist in the keel. So people said, oh, another strike against her. Not going to be a very great ship. She went on to carry lumber. Then she was sold to the Black Line Company, and they turned it into a passenger ship. And she carried passengers from England to Australia for the gold rush. At the time, the captain's nickname was Bully Forbes, and he would lock up the crew when they would get to Australia so they wouldn't leave to go dig for gold. He'd shackle them and bring them back to the ship, and he pushed them so hard, as well as the ship, that they circumnavigated the globe in 5 months and 21 days, making her the fastest ship in the world, named the Queen of the Seas. And she still has the same record. She never broke the record. Later on in her career, she was getting pretty old, starting to get a little old and rough. And so when they were going by the coast of Cavendish, Prince Edward Island, in July of 1883, they were going by, and a storm was starting to begin and brew up. And the captain said, if we don't head for shore with our masts up full, we are not going to make it. So he did just that, and they were coming in, the storm was getting worse. People from Cavendish came out in little dinghies and saved the crew and the captain as the ship went under to her watery grave. There was a little girl up on the hill watching this happen all day, and she was 12, her name was Lucy, and she wrote a story called The Wreck of the Marco Polo, and she actually entered it in a contest, a literary contest in Canada, and won first place, and that spurred her on to become a famous author that you probably will know, Lucy Montgomery, and she wrote the Anne of Green Gables series. So because of the Marco Polo spurring her on to be an author, she became just that. That summer that the Marco Polo sunk, the captain stayed with her and her aunt and uncle, and then the crew stayed with people in the town, which was like a very maritime hospitality thing that we would do. And they waited for insurance and waited to recover and get some of the things out salvaged from the ship. And then they arranged travel for all the crew to go back to their homes around Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So it was a really neat story and a really cool connection. So Lucy was actually an orphan as well and lived with her aunt and uncle. So Anne's based on her life and her dreams. We're now going by the public gardens next door to us on the driver's side. And we have lots of wedding photos and prom photos. And it is interesting because they would collect the soil from ballast from the port and bring it up here and put it in the garden. So they tested soil samples over the years, and there's soil from all around the world in our public gardens. We're now coming by one of the gems in our city is Rockwood Park, and Rockwood Park is right here. It's a 2,200-acre park. It has full-service campground, 18-hole golf course, driving range, restaurant, hike, trails, and lots of lakes, and so we rent a small boat and fish and swim. There's lifeguards in the summer, and then in the winter when it freezes over, we put a Zamboni down on it and we clear it for skating and pond hockey tournaments. So it's just beautiful there. We're glad to have that park right so close for us. You can rent a small garden plot on the driver's side if you don't want to have a garden in your property or don't have a space for it. And this is Mount Pleasant Avenue with some really unique houses. One of them is where Mr. Irving, the oil refinery guy, this is where he raised his 3 sons coming up. The house is going to be on the door side. And it's interesting because it's a beautiful Italian-style home. And there's something missing at the front driveway, and I'll see if you can guess what it is. Here we are. Yeah, it's just a small little cabin. What do you think's missing at the front driveway? There's no gate. The Irvings never felt above people, never felt like they had to keep people off the property. So if you had to come and do service something in the home or landscaping, you just rang the doorbell, and they didn't have servants. They just welcomed you in and said, what can you do and what do you need? And so it's like I say, very down to earth people. not very modest. So they've been great. They've been very great people to, like I say, be very generous with profits. And of course, a very successful company. This street these are all private homes. The trees, the fall foliage is just magnificent right now. And the houses coming up on the door side have a really neat story. These 4 houses are identical, except for the first one has had an addition added on. But now these are the 3 originals. And so there was Mr. Robert Reed and his wife lived on the up on top of the hill, and they owned this property. So they had 4 daughters, and every time one of the girls would get engaged, they would start building a house. So they built a house as a wedding gift for each of the 4 daughters. So we got towels and a toaster, and they got a house. So anyway, the thing is though, the Reeds, the parents lived in the white house up behind this little white house. So you look up on the hill and you can see where the parents were, keeping an eye on them.
Is that a real dog?
Great, he just sits there. He's awesome.
Oh my God, he looks like a estatua.
Yes, and now this house, this is a mansion I should say. The Estabrooks mansion is on the driver's side. And Mr. Estabrooks, yes, they have a gate. And they own the Red Rose Tea Company, the one that put the porcelain and the figurines in the boxes. So one morning the maid said, Mr. Estabrooks, there's a large group of ladies at the front gate, they want to talk to you. So he went out and said, how can I help? And they said, we do not like getting tea leaves in our teeth or in our teacups. What are you going to do about it? So he goes, okay, leave it with me. And he went away and he designed the gauze tea bag. Salt. Yeah. So the Red Rose Tea Company is still being made here in New Brunswick. And it's up the highway now, about an hour's drive in Sussex. But the factory's still downtown, and I'll show you the building when we go by. All the retaining walls through this street are all ballast from ships. Some are needing some work, but like I say, cast off stone from the port. The building we're coming up to on Lorraine's side is the Parks House. It is completely made of ballast. It's beautiful. The front of the building faces the harbor. It's very colonial, traditional, and this is the kitchen area. It's a bed and breakfast now, and Dr. Parks and his wife, their portraits are in the main hall. And they had 2 daughters that were really shy and really quiet little girls. And they grew up to be extremely reclusive. No one saw them around the city. They grew out in the back garden, rose garden, but otherwise not seen very much. So when their parents passed away, the lawyer said, we'd like to rewrite your will. What would anything special to add? And they said, yes, no male pallbearers. And the lawyer said, okay, can I ask why? And they said, well, if no man would take us out alive, no man will carry us out dead. So there, solved. I mean, and at the time, that would be a very strange request. So let me tell you a little bit about us Canadians. So we teach metric in the school system. We're supposed to follow everything's in metric, but we still mix up between imperial and metric. So when the baby newborns are born, we measure them in grams and check their length in centimeters, but as adults we weigh in pounds and we measure ourselves in feet. Celsius for temperature, always. I don't have a clue about Fahrenheit for temperature, but we use Fahrenheit ovens. And so then, of course, with Celsius, I keep track of Fahrenheit for you. So a typical July temperature is 74 degrees Fahrenheit. September 66. This is actually a lovely day. January 28 and April 48. So we have very cold winters. The Bay of Fundy really keeps us cool, and we have fog that rolls in with the tides. So sometimes you can't see anything. And so we call it a trust me tour. We're like, trust me, that building's over there, or your ship's still here. One day we got up to the top of Fort Howe where we're going, and you couldn't see anything, like literally nothing. You're like, where's the edge of the road? So it's kind of crazy. So we do appreciate that because we like it. We call it our natural air conditioning. The fog rolls in and goes. But when you drive in farther into the province, it gets hotter and warmer as we're farther away from the Bay of Fundy. So in St. John, we have our population is about 80 outskirts of the city, including the outskirts, is 130,000, and our province is about 840,000 total. So we're really small, and Prince Edward Island is smaller than us with less people. So, like I say, the Maritimes are made up of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. So we're the East Coast Maritimes. We're coming up to Fort Howe, and on the door side, we're going to see our blockhouse, which is called Fort Howe, built in 1777, and it was used to keep an eye on the harbor, defend the harbor. Here it is here. Oh, someone's up there in the head, what do you call this, shackles or the stockade? Yes, we have someone up there. Now this is the view that you're going to see today without fog. Wow. Get a great view. You can see Partridge Island really well. We have a very busy port. I'll stop for you to take a picture of this too up here. And where the nose of your ship is pointing is the Hilton Hotel, and it's the brick building with the brown top and dark windows. That's where the fire of 1877 started. A horse knocked over a lantern into a bale of hay in a warehouse, and it spread and it burned down the entire southern portion of the city. When the rock broke apart, continents, they landed here. So where we're going to go, there's information on Stonehammer Geology Park, and so we have a very rich, interesting history of geology. So it's quite neat. The Bay of Fundy is in between, so the Bay of Fundy is part of the Atlantic Ocean, and then it veers around, and it splits between, it comes up between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and it's wide to narrow, so it's 170 miles long, and we're about halfway down in the Bay of Fundy, so it's a perfect place to tuck away from hurricanes. So we just get tail ends of the storms. But it's interesting because when you go to the primes, we have about 25-foot high tides, and when you get to the top, smallest point of the Bay of Fundy, they're actually 58 feet high, and we have 2 tide cycles a day. So of course, it's the highest tides in the world at the smallest point of the Bay of Fundy. It's a pretty neat place to live. And our McDonald's sign looks different than your golden arches. Nothing different about ours.
The Canadian leaf.
Yeah, we have a little maple leaf in the middle. There's like, what, 6 to 8 different maple trees. And of course, some are the sweet maple syrup, and then other ones are just, like I say, just a variety that will see beautiful colors. So if you've ever had a McFlurry when the ice cream machine's working at McDonald's, it's true. McFlurries were created here in the province about 25 years ago, so we came up with a McFlurry here. As you turn the corner, look up on the hill at the Dewberry Mansion. And the Dewberry Mansion was actually built by a count from Belgium, Count Dewberry, and he married a local family's daughter, Lucy Simon. They had 9 children in that house, and she loved to dance, and so he built her a ballroom on the back. He said, that is love. My husband would say, no, ballroom. So she was lucky lady. I don't know how she had time to dance. But she had 9 kids. We're on Douglas Avenue now, and this is a really unique street with lots of interesting homes. One of them I want to point out a few of them. The one up on the hill on the driver's side is called the Wedding Cake driver's side. Mrs. Baisley lived there, and she didn't have children, but she loved children, so she raised money for a park for the kids up the street, and she sold baked goods and flowers and bought property up the street. I'll show that to you in a minute. And this pink house, there's no room on the side for driveways, so they cut the center out where the middle door is, and they drove the horse and carriage through the house to a stable in the back. So this street has beautiful homes and, let's say, lots of details, beautiful trim, stained glass windows, and there's people who really love Halloween on this street, and we're coming up to a house on the north side that's crazy. Kids love it here. Here it is here. Irving and Costco. They're the ones
Same
who
stuff
you
we
see
have.
they go by with a cart with a big skeleton. You're like, oh my goodness, what do they do with that? Right there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Like I say, up with the houses on the driver's side right here, like beautiful. Some are in great shape, some need, of course, preservation laws of, keeping them up to a certain standard. It's hard, it's expensive. This is the St. John River as we're going by on the door side. This area was 3 houses were torn down to build for expanding our museum. And the museum was started by a gentleman named Mr. Gesner. He was a scientist and discovered kerosene, but he also believed in history and preserving and collecting the artifacts to keep in the museum. So this is our museum. This is the park where Miss Paisley bought the property for the kids. The kids had a place to play. And the house that we're coming by now, I've got a story to tell you about on the way back when we pass it again. And it's beautiful, and you can see that it has a round out stained glass windows. It's beautiful. It needs some tender loving care, but it's got a really neat story. It was a Gregory house. They owned a sawmill lumber yard down where we're going in a moment. This is high school coming up, and this is Harborview High School. It was originally called vocational. It was all trades. In the 90s they got rid of the trades, and then now it's starting to come back. But this was built in 1925, so it's 100 years old. And they just had their birthday in September, and they're having lots of really fun celebrations and special football games, and it's been great. So Fallsview Park is, we're going to go down there and show you where the river meets the Bay of Fundy, and there's a washroom there, and there's lookouts 2 different ways. And we're going to stop there for 15 minutes so you can enjoy the river. So what happens here is where the St. John River comes down through the middle of right down from the top of the province through the province. So my arm's like the river. And then the Bay of Fundy is underneath, it comes around and it meets the river underneath the bridge down here. So what's happening is that the typical river flows into the ocean, and when it's low tide, it flows, and it's wild and dangerous because it's class 5 rapids here. But then when it's high tide, the Bay of Fundy is so high, it actually pushes the river backwards and it reverses backwards. So it does the same thing but goes backwards. And it's something that typically doesn't happen, but it's such a strong tidal system that it actually reverses the river upon itself. And then when they're both equal, it's called slack tides. We have a low slack and a high slack, and that's when it looks like a lake, and it's so high that it's over top of the rocks. And it's to the point where that's 20-minute window when a sailboat or a powerboat or canoes can go through. And it's the only time that they should travel through the falls area because it's so dangerous. So we are coming into, it's interesting because we're literally at the we're at the end of high tide. So the water's still coming down and
that's
going into the Bay of Fundy. So the Bay of Fundy is over here under the bridge. And so at 1:47, it's low tide when it's actually just going to be rushing, and it will be all class 5 rapids here. So it's really interesting. So we're going to be here for 15 minutes. The washroom is right here in front of us, in front of the buses. There's a lookout this way. Lucid lobster. Maybe you'll find lucid lobster later to eat for a lobster roll. West Side knows somebody that works there, so you're like, give us a case of toilet paper, please. Never panicked like other people did. So this whole area was lumber mills and sawmills down here, and so the logs would float down the river, and then they'd pull them in before they'd get around to the rough part. My grandson, who's 4, he calls this the cloud factory, so because the steam coming out. So yeah, so they spent like millions of dollars many years ago to chemicals and the process of not having the smell of a tissue mill. So like I say, Irving's expanding that. So they also have a paper mill on the other side of the city, and of course they are into forestry, so they provide their own pulp and wood chips. And they have a desalination plant on the other side that's new about a year ago to use the water from the Bay of Fundy and take the salt out instead of piping water in. So, which makes perfect sense. This beige building is an apartment building, but it used to be an Eastern Bakeries, and so everybody who lives there says it smells like baked bread all the time. You either be sick of it or love it. So. How they painted their houses, it's bright colors. Yeah, you'd be like, no, I don't like the color, but it's funky colors. Teachers to me saying, it's so good to be in school. Can't help it, can't make the teacher of it. So back to this house that we went by earlier, the Gregory house, the one here that's cut up. And the Gregory's owned sawmill and lumberyard down by the falls. This is the home they had. And when they first got married, he took her on a European trip and for their honeymoon, and he said, buy everything you want for the house, rugs, drapes, furniture, and we'll ship it back with us. So when it was time to return home, she said, I really want to stay longer. So they stayed another 3 weeks. And so when they got home, they contacted the port and said, did our things arrive from New York? And they said, no, because your things were on the Titanic and are gone. They were supposed to be on the Titanic, and because of their changing their plans to stay longer and save their lives. Wow. So I'm telling you this, shopping can save your life.
Told you.
I swear. Save their lives, so their boarding passes are actually framed in the house, so it's a really good story. This street is Bentley Street, and Bentley Street, before it was Bentley Street, it was a portage area for our indigenous people, the Wolastoqey people. They would come in from their encampments down along the river. They would take their canoes out right where the museum is, and they would walk down here and then put the mast in the harbor and continue on to trade their beaver pelts at Georgia Shore, which is, there's actually a little fort that's built down there as a replica. And this was, so it was like a portage area so they could avoid the falls and the rapids. So, and of course they did archaeological digs on this street and found thousands of pieces of indigenous artifacts. So anyway, it's really interesting. So someone was asking me about snow. We get snow. We get a lot of snow. 1 to 2 feet when we do get it, and oftentimes more. And like I say, we have 2 to 7 snow days a winter because we close the schools when the roads are that bad. And one year in 2015, we called it Snowmageddon because we had so much snow that winter, it was extreme. And uptown, and the uptown streets are very narrow, so they truck snow out of the uptown, put it on the port or dump it in the harbor. And it's typically 2,700 truckloads of snow a winter. But that year, it was actually like 17,000 truckloads of snow came into the uptown. So we called it Snowmageddon. It was crazy. And the radio was on to guess when the last bit of snow would melt. And it was the first get the bread, milk, and the store chips. They're actually called store chips. And in the summer, they're called weekenders. So if you're uptown at the market, like you say, or around the stores, check for ketchup chips. And we've got some really neat other little things to share with you as we go along. But we have lobster flavored chips too. Lobster flavored seasoning. Up on the hill, we have our St. John sign. We're like Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. I get it.
Can you take a photo?
We have something called the Harbor Passage. It is a red painted path all the way along our waterfront from where your ship is. It goes both ways, but which way you want to go
Behind
is
them.
toward, like the cruise terminal will take you right over to the container village, and you can go all the way
Yeah,
around.
just take a
and it'll
photo
lead
of
you
that.
all along the harbor front, all the way. It's accessible the whole way, and you can say you can check out the harbor seals down along the water. There's benches, placards, and gardens all the way along. It's really beautiful. So we're coming up to Main Street.
Angle
And
your
Main
camera,
Street is-
Kumar.
If you look both ways, it's a
Make
very
sure the
long
flags
street
come out.
with a median down the middle. And we, as elementary
Thank you.
classrooms, we always grew marigolds every spring. And then we would plant them the whole length of the street in May. Irving would pay for the buses for us to take the kids. We closed off the street for the morning. And it's called Marigolds on Main Street. And we actually made the Guinness World Book of Records for the most marigolds on one street. And all the retaining walls are painted by the high school art classes. And that also is part of the marigold program. But if you know what marigolds smell like, they don't smell very good in your classroom. So when they started to bloom, I'm like, so I'd say, who has their shoes off? Like, oh yeah, it's marigolds. Not the rubber boots and the shoes.
It's a good red flower though.
The building on the driver's side is the harbor station or TD station. And it's where our St. John Sea Dogs play, the Quebec Major Junior Hockey team. They're named after the harbor seals because they're feisty and strong. And that's what we named our team that. On the door side is the Red Rose Tea building coming up, the factory of Mr. Esther Brooks. It's all been redone as offices now. And we're coming back to the uptown area. We have the Canada Beach Aquatic Center, which is an Olympic-sized pool with a great roof here. And we have summer games in Canada, and all the 10 provinces and 3 territories send athletes to compete. And this year was in St. John's, Newfoundland. And in a few years, it's back here in St. John. This is a nice area for you to explore. This is the Market Square. It's a meeting place. And the harbor passage comes all the way through. There's patios, restaurants. And down where the person with the bright orange jacket is, you can actually tip your toes or fingers in the Bay of Fundy. There's a set of stairs that go down, and you can check that out. The container village is called Area 506 after our local phone area code. It's got a little take on Area 51. And it was created by a guy named Ray Gracewood 10 years ago. And he went to a port city in Europe, and they were having music festivals with the containers all around, closing in the music festival. So he brought that idea back, and we've had 10 years of music on our waterfront. And then the container village, they're all renovated to be little shops and restaurants and a bar in there. And there's beaver tails in there, so you gotta try a beaver tail. And it's a deep piece of dough shaped like a beaver tail, deep fried, and it's nice and crispy and soft. And they put Nutella and bananas, strawberries, cinnamon sugar, whatever you want on it. And then you can take a picture, send it home, and say, we just ate a beaver tail in Canada. And people will say, oh my goodness, that's crazy. And you go, yeah, that's what I did. So, we're gonna try beaver. In the market is where we're going to stop in a moment for you to explore if you wish. So the market is this building that's right here with the round windows. And it's a length of a street block. It is the oldest market in Canada. And it is, if you look at the ceiling, it's an inverted hull of a ship. And it's one block, and it's like a low grade, like slant down. It's got bakery and fruit and vegetables, lots of preserved products, and